still teach at ASU. I'm coming to you from my office right now. I've changed my career. I don't do concrete and steel like I used to. I'm more concerned about mental health. So the challenge here is, what can engineering do for mental health? And I consider that part of my responsibility as an environmental engineer. Public health has always been part of my mission. But now it's a different approach. It's not about clean water, clean air. It's about how do we get to well-being.
Welcome all to the Future's Edge show. I am Jim Urio. That is Bob Iacchino, co-host. And today's interesting because you guys who watch the show know that about 60% of the shows we do are heavy econ, finance, trader talk. Occasionally we deviate for things that we find important. We deviated for Kevin Roberts of the Heritage Foundation. We deviated for Dave Collum from Cornell University. That was a wild trip. If you guys haven't seen that episode, please do. Today we're talking about health. Today, health is something that's important to everybody. And I started a particular health journey myself about a year ago. And Dr. Tom Seager, who's the president, the owner, the CEO of Morozko Forge cold therapy tubs, was an interesting story because Dr. Tom was a professor and a PhD and left that all to run a company that sells cold plunge tubs. We're gonna dive into why. Dive in. Actually, that could have been a good metaphor for a tub, right? We're gonna dive into why that happened. But first of all, I want to tell you what my journey is, Dr. Tom. And you know that a year ago today, I felt that there was something completely messed up about my immune system, and I needed to find something to fix it. So I started with cold therapy, and now I am absolutely addicted to it. And people out there think it seems crazy to jump into an ice tub. You don't jump into an ice tub at first. You jump into a 55-degree tub. You don't have to kill yourself. Dr. Tom, thank you for coming on.
It's a pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so let's break it down from the beginning for these people, because everybody sees, it's this new fad, and everybody thinks it's half crazy. I thought it was half crazy too. My wife thought it was half crazy. My wife and I have been married for 33 years. And for anyone else out there who's been married 33 years, my wife is not really very quick and enthusiastic to embrace something her husband is into and trying to get her to do. So she did it secretly about 10 times, and now she is addicted. But why? I know that it helps me. It helps with the aches and pains. Why do you think it helps with the immune system?
Because your body is evolved to expect cold exposure. You carry the mitochondria of ancient human ancestors, the ones who survived the Ice Age. And those ancient ancestors of yours, I don't care where your people are from, Southern Italy or Norway or the Caribbean, it doesn't matter. We all descend from those Homo sapiens that survived the Ice Age. They were accustomed to the cold. Their bodies are built to expect the cold. And we carry the same mitochondrial DNA that they do, because mitochondria have their own DNA. It's not reproduced sexually like the DNA in your nucleus. It's inherited exclusively from the mother. And so it will mutate and change over time, but much more slowly than the DNA in the nucleus. So you go back 10,000 years to the Ice Age, we're still essentially the same bodily, like metabolic human beings that survived then. And those humans, they were cold. We are adapted to expect cold exposure, just like we're adapted to expect sunshine or exercise or the other things that are good for us. And if we don't get enough cold, we get sick.
Tom, I think anyone who's ever played any sort of a sport on any medium to high level has had an injury iced or has jumped into a tub or something like that to get rid of the soreness. This is the same idea, number one. And number two, I don't have a cold plunge tub. I'm here in Florida. I came here to get away from the cold, certainly not to embrace it. So I'm super interested in what this does, short term versus long term, the actual science of it.
So, Bobby, we'll fix that problem where you don't have a cold tub. I mean, I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and the water isn't even cold enough to have cold showers, which is why me and my
can't do it.
Right?
Can't get a cold.
We invented this because of Phoenix. If we were up in Wisconsin or something, we probably wouldn't have even bothered. but enough time in Phoenix and you lose your brown fat, you lose your thermal defense systems, and your body becomes dysregulated by the lack of cold exposure. Same thing can happen to you in Florida. So we got to get you the right equipment. The Gulf of Mexico isn't going to do it for you. You're going to need some real cold like Jim's got in Chicago. But you're asking about, your high school track coach or whomever it was who said, hey, that was a tough practice. Now you got to ice your knees. They were thinking specifically about inflammation and the pain that is associated with it. We are now on the cusp of a enormous change in the science of cold therapy, because it wasn't until maybe 10 years ago that medical doctors came around to the idea that we even have brown fat as grown-ups. Brown fat is a specific kind of fat, not for energy storage, but for energy conversion. It's brown because it's packed with mitochondria. So when you get cold, it activates your brown fat, causes non-shivering thermogenesis, which keeps your body warm without your muscles shivering. Babies have all kinds of brown fat. Children have lots of brown fat. But if you don't get enough cold, you lose it as an adult. So there was this study, Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. They went back and they looked at all their PET scans and they said, how many people have really got this brown fat? And it was fewer than 5% of adults older than 45 years old had any brown fat, any detectable brown fat at all in these scans. We lose it. And you think, well, that's not a big deal. I stay indoors and I stay warm. But brown fat does more than thermogenesis. It is a secretory organ. That is, it produces more thyroid hormone than the thyroid will. So if you don't have brown fat, your thyroid can become dysregulated. It produces neuroprotective factors that keep your brain intact so you don't degenerate into dementia. The brown fat isn't just a nice to have. If you want to stay healthy longer, like I do, then you got to get some cold to keep your brown fat active. Some people are going to go skiing. It's not something that I do a lot of. I'm not sitting on, a positive trading sheet from my commodities background or something. And so instead, I buy a Morozco and I get in there every morning. That keeps my brown fat going.
Dr. Tom, what I noticed, and I've been doing it for close to a year. When June comes, it'll be a year. I lost like 3 or 4 pounds, and I've been battling with excessive skinniness my whole life. I'm not trying to lose 3 or 4 pounds, and I'm not honestly not like bragging about that. I move around too much. I do a lot of shit. I lost like 3 or 4 pounds. When I speak of it around particularly young women and talk about it, and I just kind of mention offhandedly that it seems to me to make you more metabolically active and make it much easier to lose weight. That seems to pique their interest. I'm not crazy. It does burn more calories. It does make you burn more calories, does it not?
It does when you're doing it. What most people miss is that it will also bring your core temperature down at night. So, I do my forage in the morning and it revs up my metabolism. I get a nice hit of dopamine and norepinephrine, and I have all of this energy and I sleep great. Because compensatory metabolic mechanisms will conserve calorie burn during the evening. My core body temperature likely, I haven't measured it, but my core body temperature likely drops a little bit, helps me sleep at night. And on the whole, I don't burn more calories because I've been in the ice bath. You probably lost a few pounds of inflammation. And then if you double down on the cold exposure, it's like, well, I want to lose more weight. I'm going to do more. Your body will respond in ways that prevent that weight loss. Instead, it will redistribute the fat that you do have. Now, Jim, I got a lot of fat to redistribute, and you don't have much, but it will take the belly fat, the visceral fat, which is unhealthy, and it will move it out to just underneath the skin, called subcutaneous fat, which helps protect the core body against cold. And so there's a healthy remodeling of your body. The testosterone boost that men get if you exercise after the cold will also help build lean body mass. But this idea that cold will help you burn calories, it's a bit of a misnomer. You get a little bit of a boost from reduced inflammation right away, and you see the scale is going to respond. And then it turns out that your body's really good at keeping those set points. If you want to lose weight, cold is not going to be the way to do it. You got to change your diet. You got to get into more protein, fewer refined carbohydrates, fewer processed foods, and probably some intermittent fasting. Cold is not going to be, even though it revs your metabolism when you're in there, on the whole, it's not going to be the secret to calorie burn. I'm not making this up. NIH has funded a lot of studies on deliberate cold exposure, metabolism, and weight loss. And they've been trying to measure this now for about a decade. And you will see zero before after pictures on Instagram where people say, I eat whatever I want and look at how ripped I am because I do ice baths. The body doesn't respond to the cold water the way we sometimes wish it would, or I'd be one of those, Instagram, I'd look like Ben Greenfield by now. It's not happening for me.
Okay. So there's one thing I wanted to add to that. Well, first of all, I take health very seriously. Like right now, I'm drinking matcha tea, which matcha tea by itself isn't bad. But when you mix in turmeric and black pepper, it's goddamn awful. And I'm drinking it anyway, even though, so every time I take a sip, that's the face you're seeing. Okay, you mentioned doing it in the morning. I can't do it in the morning. I have really, really early mornings. I tend to do it at 4 o'clock. When we finish taping this, I plan on going in the cold plunge tub it's probably a little warmer today because it's warm in Chicago, and then doing some yoga and some push-ups afterwards. I'm usually warmed up and relaxed by the time I go to bed. What's the best time of the day to do it, particularly for things like sleep?
Well, this is what your basketball coach didn't tell you in high school. Do your ice bath before your exercise, not after. This is one of the big changes in the science of cold water therapy that we're beginning to realize. And this is especially true for men. You do the ice bath before, and it's called pre-cooling. So your mitochondria don't get overtaxed by the exercise that you're doing. When you do it before, and then you do a little bit, it doesn't have to be a huge workout afterwards, you re-warm, you get your circulation going. Testosterone in men goes way up. And that gives you an additional anabolic benefit, a little more hypertrophy from your workout because you pre-cooled it. Craig Heller at Stanford was on the Huberman podcast, and he's got some really good papers on this. In addition to the testosterone boost, you get a big boost in peak muscle power. You get a big boost in endurance because your mitochondria work better when you keep them cool. So when's the best time to do it? Do it when you can exercise after. You get up really early, you're trying to track the markets in Europe or whatever is going on, and you're like, I don't want to step away from my screen for 45 minutes to an hour while everything's open. But by the time New York shuts down, you're like, all right, now I can do some cold, I can do some yoga. That's the right time for you. Me, I'm out on half the time I'm on Pacific time. I also get up really early, but I will take a break at dawn. I like getting that light in my eyes. I like that early, time when things are still quiet. That's when I get in. And then I'll do some pull-ups, I'll do some squats, or I'll do some steel mace flow afterwards. And it takes about 45 minutes on the whole for me to complete that routine.
Bobby, why is everything so expensive? Just to put a point on this, I haven't brought my lunch to work in 20 years, and my 3 eggs and bacon used to cost $7. Now they cost $14. My wireless bill was so expensive. Why the heck is wireless so expensive?
I don't know. I mean, it feels like a car payment from 10 years ago, what you pay for wireless now. I mean, what are you paying all that money for? Is it speed, coverage, data? Is it this 5G that we all needed access to? Unlimited talk and text, which I feel like we've had forever. Mobile hotspots, which I don't use all that much. What are we paying all that money for?
This is not going to come as a surprise to you, but we have the answer right here on the Futures Edge podcast, because the Futures Edge podcast is partnering with Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile offers all these features for as low as $15 per month. It's built on the nation's largest 5G network. The reason it keeps costs low is because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores, they cut out the salespeople. It's just a much more efficient process.
Like, why should anybody have to pay more than you have to for access to the same exact network? Go to mintmobile.com/futuresedge. Also linked in the show description to get a premium wireless service for, you ready for it? $15 a month.
Okay, and if you're like people who are old like Bobby and I, we don't like to change anything. We don't like our routines to change. Now, you want to know how hard it is to switch your service? Well, the big wireless companies want you to think it's really hard, but switching to Mint Mobile is super easy thanks to their digital eSIM card, which most phones now have. You can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. If your phone doesn't have an eSIM, Mint will ship you a new SIM card for free. How about that?
Jimmy and I talk about not wanting anyone to tell us what to do, that sort of libertarian bent that we both have. Well, Big Wireless wants you to think they're the only option. So do not be fooled. Go to mintmobile.com/futuresedge. Also, again, linked in the show description, and stop paying more than you have to for your phone plan. By the way, now through the end of January, new customers can get any plan for just $15 a month when they purchase 3 months or more. This includes the unlimited plan, which is normally $30 a month. So not only are you going to save the difference between your current plan and Mint Mobile's normal pricing, but you're going to save $45 for 3 months or more if you sign up for more versus Mint's own normally low prices. Complete no-brainer. Don't even think about it. Go to mintmobile.com/futuresedge.
But maybe you should wait till after you watch the podcast. We don't want you guys leaving the podcast right now. So watch the podcast first and then go to Mint Mobile and hit that link. Thank you, guys.
Tom, I want to make sure people understand the difference between brown fat and white fat. So, I mean, for example, brown fat, it's around your spine, and up near your neck is mostly where it's stored. So this is a two-part question. So if you could, tell everybody the difference from your perspective of brown fat versus white fat. And then the second question is going to be, and you can just go right into the answer of it. I lived in Chicago for most of my life. I got really fucking cold. So what is the advantage for somebody like Jimmy, who's still dumb, who still lives in Chicago? And
I heard that.
No, that was it's my mic is kind of screwed up today. Who still lives in Chicago to also do something like a cold plunge?
Bobby, you remember being a kid, and there were some really terrible winters, like 77, 78. I mean, it was the Carter administration, and there was these wicked cold snap. I was in Pittsburgh, and some of the football games, that were on Steve Sable's this week in the NFL with the Buffalo Bills in the snow. And it was great because school was out, and I got my snow shovel, and I went and made money,
Yep.
And so that's not bad for a 12-year-old kid. I didn't care about the cold. We went sledding all day.
Yep.
We knew, we'd come in if we were cold. We'd say, hey, Mom, do you have any hot cocoa? Because I guess we were smart enough then. But then when you grow up, you don't think of it like we stopped sledding. I don't shovel sidewalks for money anymore. And we want to stay comfortable. So here's Jim in Chicago, the windy city. But Jim stays inside. All right, I don't really know what your routine is, Jim, but a lot of people in Chicago are like, oh, no. I'm going to go from my living room to my garage, hit my heated leather seat button in my SUV, drive, from Evanston downtown or whatever, take my underground tunnel to my building, get in my elevator. When did they ever get outside? And then I know they're all bundled up and they get in, they go, oof, it's cold. Yeah, for 2 seconds. It's not like when we were kids and we would be outside for hours. When my kids were little, we were in New Hampshire. They used to play in the yard during the winter in the snow, like they were at the beach or something. They're digging their tunnels and things like that. The cold exposure takes me back to what it was like to be a kid and not care, not complain about it, not so what, Chicago. I was in Chicago after I started my cold plunges, and I forgot my winter coat. This was January. And I thought, but I have a scarf. I'm fine. I don't get cold like I used to, as a grown-up. I feel more like a kid again. So if Jimmy wanted to do it, he would say, you know what? I'm going for a run, but I'm just going to go in a T-shirt and shorts. I know it's January. I'm just going to let that cold air come in up against my skin, get my nervous system going. And that is one of the big differences between brown fat and white fat. White fat is primarily for energy storage to get you through, or your ancestors through, the lean times. But brown fat is highly innervated. That is, it's connected to the nervous system, because when the thermoreceptors in your skin sense cold, they send a signal up to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus says, uh-oh, it starts this sympathetic nervous system fight or flight reaction when it's really cold. And it will send through the nervous system signals to the brown fat that say, you better get busy. Your liver will release what's called glycogen. It breaks down into glucose into your bloodstream to feed that brown fat the glucose that it needs for thermogenesis. But your liver will run out of that glucose really fast. So your white fat cells release lipids into your bloodstream. They're carried to the brown fat, and the brown fat burns those lipids up just to create more heat. It's quite an ingenious system. The brown fat is located around the clavicles, the shoulder blades, around the heart, in all the places that you need, so that when it's generating heat, it will warm the blood before it reaches the brain. Your body's very clever when you give it what it needs to stay healthy.
So I have a quick question too. You mentioned something about glycogen, about glucose, and I know there is a very, very deep school of thought that believes that cold therapy is one of the keys to treating cancer. A lot of people hear us say that, be like, "What? Are you talking about you guys can cure cancer now?" Not saying that necessarily. I am saying there's a lot of people who believe it, and I'm starting to lean that way. Can you explain the process through with ketosis, cold therapy, how it all fits into starving cancer cells potentially?
Yeah, I didn't believe it either. I got a phone call from a customer in Oregon. His name is Dean Hall, and he was looking for a Morozco. And this is way back, 5 years ago when we first started the business. He said, I used to have leukemia and lymphoma, and I was, it was a death sentence. These are inoperable, untreatable, but they're slow acting. So I said to my doctor, I wanted to do something to inspire other cancer patients. And I'm a swimmer, so I swam the entire length of the Willamette River in Oregon. He came out of the river and he didn't have leukemia anymore. He went down to San Diego to have his blood drawn, and they said there's no trace of leukemia in his body. He goes, so I'm going to do cold exposure for the rest of my life. Can I get one of your units? No, I'm like, Jimmy, okay, guy, sure, we're going to ship you a unit, but this, you swim in the cold and that cures leukemia? I don't know about that. So I went to the library and I found Thomas Seyfried's book on the metabolic origins of cancer. Everything Seyfried says makes sense to me. He's taken cancer cells and removed their mitochondria, inserted healthy mitochondria, and it fixes the cancerous DNA in the nucleus. Seyfried says cancer is not a defect that originates in the nucleic DNA. It originates in the mitochondria, and it is the nucleic DNA that are damaged after the mitochondria. He goes, we've got the order of operations all wrong. When you fix the metabolism, he says, you give the immune system and the cells in your body the energy that they need to heal. Well, so I got Seyfried's metabolic theory, and then I got Dean Hall telling me I can't deny his experience. This is what happened to him. And then I got a call. I was in Texas with my daughter, and I got a call from AJK. You know her on Twitter. And she said she was having acute abdominal pain. Maybe it was just like an ovarian cyst or something. She's had stuff like this before, but it feels really bad. And I'm like, get yourself to the emergency room. This was pre-COVID, pre-masks, pre-isolation. I said, get yourself to the hospital and find out what this is. I'm getting on a plane and I'm going to come out and I'm going to see you. Well, they scanned her. They took her blood work, went straight up to the tumor board. She had a tumor on her liver that was bleeding out. And this is what was causing the pain. It's inoperable. Chemo will not help. So she asked her doctor there, well, what will help? And he said, watchful waiting. Well, Jimmy, what the hell is watchful waiting?
We don't do watchful waiting.
A tumor comes out of nowhere and it's sitting on this scan and it's over 4 centimeters long and it's on your liver and it's killing you. And the doctor's like, so we're going to keep an eye on that,
Yeah,
and
no.
She's got 4 daughters, and she's like, Tom, what am I going to do? And I said, we are going to follow the Dean Hall prescription. We're going to get all of the carbs out, all the alcohol out because it's processed in the liver, and we're going to get you in the ice bath. We're going to do what Dean did, and we're going to keep our fingers crossed. 3-4 months go by. She has another scan, and damned if that tumor didn't shrink. Here's something that spontaneous tumors don't do, Jimmy. They don't shrink of their own accord. It was keto and ice bath that got that tumor under control. She's supposed to have a scan now every 6 months, but she won't go back because it was February 2019. She had her first follow-up scan, shrunk the tumor. And you know why she won't go back? Because she made me promise I will never take her to a hospital that will separate her from her daughters, that say, you have to be in isolation. Your, family isn't allowed to come visit. She says, I would rather die at home than alone in a hospital being treated by those doctors that told me there was nothing they could do anyway. So she sticks with she's not as steady about it as you are, but she sticks with the ice baths and she's heavy into the ketosis. Seafood has used ketones to not shrink, I should say, inhibit the growth of tumor cells in mice. And there's another group out of Sweden. They took mice, they implanted tumors in them, and then they put them in the cold. And it was something like 4 hours a day. It wasn't chronic. It was just periodic cold exposure. And they got the same result, inhibit the tumor growth. And so your question, how could this possibly, we have these miraculous stories from people. How could it possibly be happening? In the Swedish study, they were measuring where does the glucose go? Something like 80% of tumor cells are upregulated with a gene for glucose metabolism. They need the glucose. But when you put that mouse, and they confirm this in a human being, so when you put that mammal in a cold environment, the glucose is preferentially taken up by the brown fat. The brown fat is clearing glucose out of the bloodstream, and there's none left for the tumor cells. The tumor cell can't get the glucose that it needs. Some tumor cells can metabolize other substrates, and some can't. But you're slowing the tumor down by taking away that glucose rocket fuel that it was using to proliferate. So I put out these articles, and I know you've read them. And thank God the FDA is not reading them, because I say, look, this isn't medical advice. And, I'm not giving you medical advice. And I can't tell you that cold cures cancer. But every once in a while, someone will come across them. And I get text messages like you wouldn't believe. The latest one is a woman. She's a mom in the United Kingdom. She said, I read your articles. I was stage 4 colorectal cancer during COVID. Of course, I missed scans. Of course, I missed treatment. And I went to stage 4 because the radiation and the chemo just wasn't working. They told me to go home and get my affairs in order. What I got instead was an ice bath. She said, I am 10 months past the death sentence that they gave me when they said, I think you got, so many years to live. She goes, I feel great. I don't know, because I'm not having scans anymore. I'm not having blood work done anymore. There's nothing they can do for me. All I know is I feel so good, and my kids sometimes do it with me. So we did this interview. That was January. A couple of weeks ago, she texted me, and she said, I had pain in my hip, and I got really scared because I thought maybe it's the radiation I had, or maybe it's the cancer coming back. I went back in for a scan. No cancer anywhere. She goes, the pain was a problem with my lumbar. She goes, I'm cancer free. Now, I keep telling these stories because what does it hurt when the doctors say there's nothing I can do for you? What does it hurt to get in the ice bath? There's no adverse side effects. She's in there 2-3 minutes at a time, and it's about 34 degrees. She's like 2 degrees Celsius, something like that. And if you feel like great energy, isn't that better than the chemo that isn't going to save your life anyway? So I can't tell anybody what's going to work for them. All I can say is this is what AJ did. And I'm so glad that she did. This is what worked for Dean Hall. This is what happened for Jane in the United Kingdom. These are the text messages that show up. And these are the mechanisms that Thomas Seyfried and the Secchi group in Sweden say it could be happening. So maybe give it a shot.
So you're not, and I just want to clarify this because I was going to compliment you, and I guess I'm doing that right now, on your honesty about the weight loss, because the easiest thing for you to do would have been like, oh yeah,
Sure, yeah.
immediately lose a few pounds. I mean, forget the Ozempic they're taking. They jump right in the bath and they immediately lose a few pounds. So you're not out there saying that ice baths cure cancer. That's not what you're saying here, right? You're saying you have
Bobby, if I were saying, if I weren't honest, all you'd have to do is take a look at me on stage and you'd be like, that guy's full of crap. I mean,
I always wonder about those clinical dietitians and doctors.
Yeah, who are you going to take advice from, right? But the fact is that there's also good studies on this.
That ice baths cure cancer, right? That's not what you're saying. You're saying that it seems to have helped some people, maybe with some other things combined, but
and it's worth a shot.
It has so many benefits that you might as well choose to do it.
I got a book coming out, first week of March. I'm going to go to CryoCon in Dallas. I'm going to get on the stage and I'm going to essentially launch the book. Maybe somebody will listen to me talk for 45 minutes and they're going to want to buy it. We'll find out. But in that preface, I talk about the evolution of my thinking as a scientist. Nothing matters but your N=1 experience. I don't care what the peer-reviewed, double-blind, randomized controlled trial with the P99 says. Are you in the 99? Are you in the 1%? That didn't respond like that. If you can't make it work for you, it's because it doesn't work. So I still see these guys on Twitter who will reply on my stuff and say, there's no randomized control trial that says the thing that happened to you actually happened to you. So it didn't happen. Screw you. What works for you works for you. And some people will say, well, that's the placebo effect. So I love the placebo effect.
Right. Best thing ever. Somebody told me I was 6'4". I believed them. I ain't. So I wanted to ask you about that because I'm very glad to hear you say that, because the one thing I get now from a lot of friends and family members, because I only eat meat and eggs. I don't eat anything else. I eat no vegetables. I eat a little bit of dairy, but I eat only animal products. No vegetables, no fruit, just water, a little bit of coffee, some bourbon, which I think is an animal product when you get.
No, it's a seed.
Yeah.
Don't get in the way of a good story.
But back to your whole thing, you mentioned cold plunge and ketosis. I don't do it specifically to achieve ketosis. I do it because I feel unbelievable. I mean, I'll be 58 years old in September. I know I look great. I can't remember. It's been since my 30s since I felt like this. Like joint pain went away, back pain went away. Weight came off, even though I wasn't necessarily trying to get it to come off. Energy went through the roof. The one thing I will say, though, is that occasionally, and I only lift weights. Jim talks about yoga and push-up. I lift weights and I ride my bike. That's all I do. And every once in a while, I get a little joint tweak and I'm like, that cold tub, man. Because doctors, which I don't go to anymore, I don't blame AJ for that. I don't go to them unless I'm dying. Ice it, then heat it, then ice it, then rub it with this medicine, and get yourself some Voltaren and rub it into your joint and all this. Whenever I just remember hurting, and then they said ice, and then it didn't hurt anymore. And it seems to me it's not just norepinephrine, right? I mean, it's not just a spike in norepinephrine. It's longer lasting. And you say it's the mitochondria? This is the part I'm trying to understand.
I read somewhere that there is no pain without inflammation. And it sounded to me like an exaggeration, but I've been thinking about it ever since. And I think there's some truth to it. The ice is really good for reducing inflammation. And I think that's one of the long-lasting effects that you're talking about. But it goes deeper than this. There's a medical safety specialist nurse in California, and she's been, following me on Instagram. She has rheumatoid arthritis, and she's younger than you and I. And this seems like tragic. This is an autoimmune disorder. And so it's her own immune system swelling the cartilage in her hands, and it makes it painful and difficult for her to work her shift. But, she's following me, and her boyfriend follows me, and she said, well, I'll try some of this cold plunge stuff. Pain goes away. And the pain goes away for two reasons. It takes the inflammation down right away, but it also modulates the immune system. That is, her immune system was out of whack, and rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disorder. When you modulate the immune system and you bring it sort of back into line, you are treating the underlying cause of the problem, not just sort of taking away some of the inflammation so she has better mobility and temporary freedom from the pain. She is sold. She's going to keep doing this and keep doing this and keep doing this because she never wants to go back to that feeling of not being able to open the bottles or handle the inventory or key the things in at her computer during her shift. And I say more power to her. One of the things that your family might be ragging on you about is vitamin C. If all you eat is animal products, then they'll say, where are you going to get enough vitamin C? And people ask Sean Baker about this. He's a medical doctor, and he's, a carnivore, big account on Twitter. And he says, I don't know. I'm not worried about it. And I had to look into it a little bit more. It turns out that vitamin C is used to metabolize carbohydrates. And Sean Baker is hardly eating any carbohydrates. And then it all of a sudden clicked. My people are from the North Sea, whether it's England or Norway or Denmark or whatever. What the hell did they do during the winter? You think that they were eating Valencia oranges or something? What did they do without vitamin C? Did they all just die of scurvy? And the answer was they didn't eat any carbohydrates either. Again, my people are digesting milk into adulthood, and they save their cows, and they're drinking their cream, and they're eating their salmon and their pork. They didn't need the vitamin C because they weren't eating the carbohydrates. This is why some animals can synthesize vitamin C and human beings can't anymore, because our ancestors have been eating animal products for so long that vitamin C synthesis was superfluous. When we do get carbs in sort of this natural kind of primal way of living, if you watch Liver King, when we do, it comes in fruit. It comes with, the blueberries and the apples and the sources of the vitamin C with it. Now, sometimes we eat too many seeds, whether that's seed oil, or we eat too much bread, or we eat too much grain, and it doesn't come with the vitamin C. We got to, if you're eating too many carbs, you've got to make sure your vitamin C is solid. But you, Bobby, have a steak. You do look great, and it's working for you. So don't take any more crap from your family until they try it.
I'm sorry, Jimmy, this is what makes me, listen very clearly to what you're saying about cold plunge and what Jimmy's been saying to me for months, because, you got all these, you mentioned treating the root cause of things in the mitochondria and the brown fat and the lack of cold exposure that adults get. And, you go to a doctor now and they just want to give you something that makes the symptoms go away, and they don't address any cause. The second thing my family always says, well, you need your fiber. No, I don't. Because literally, I don't shit anymore. Like I shit five once or twice a week. And it's like, I don't feel congested. I don't have any waste. My body's using everything. I know, Jimmy. I know.
No, it's okay. I think we should have a special podcast just on shitting, is what I think.
What do I need fiber for when my body's using everything? I'm less bloated. But this is why, again, with the cold plunging, why I get such a kick out of the idea of it is, so I saw, you probably know who this is, but Susanna Solberg, she reported on a study that she did, and she's in Finland or Sweden or somewhere in the North Sea-ish. Denmark, that's it.
Copenhagen University.
Yeah, and she published a study in Cell Reports Medicine that talked about the contrast therapy. And it's something that they've been doing up north for a long, long time, where they go for these short swims and then extended saunas, and then short swims and extended saunas. Is that anything you've ever looked at in terms of the benefit of it, or do you think people get enough warmth and really it's just the cold part that's missing?
Well, I've looked at it to the extent that I've read her paper. She
Okay.
did her dissertation on brown fat winter swimmers using PET scans to see who's activating the brown fat and how much they have. And it's only been the last 10 years that there's now such a thing as a brown fat scientist, because doctors weren't paying attention. Now you can get a PhD in brown fat. You got Ben Bickman at Brigham Young University up in Provo, and he studies insulin and metabolism, and he's also at the leading edge of this brown fat movement in science. It's very new, and it's changing our understanding of cold therapy. Here's what I really like about the sauna and the cold plunge together. It's thermal contrast that affects the vascular system in two ways. The cold causes vasoconstriction. So this is the smooth muscle tissue around your blood vessels. They constrict so that the blood no longer flows into your limbs. And it does this to defend core body temperature, try and maintain this homeostasis, despite the fact that you're, swimming in the fjord of Denmark or something. Then you go in the sauna, and as long as it's a dry sauna, you get vasodilation. So this is relaxation of the smooth muscle tissues. This is like a workout for your blood vessels. It improves your circulation, reduces your risk of circulatory disease, heart disease, stroke, deep vein thrombosis, all these things, and extends your life. Where people go wrong is they get in the hot tub. And, hot tubs are kind of still a new thing. Like in the 70s, hot tubs and water beds were all the rage. Water beds turn out to be a fad, and hot tubs are here to stay. But that's not the Scandinavian or the Finnish tradition. They would light a fire and they would do dry heat and wet cold. That's the good thermal contrast. When you get into the hot tub, you don't sweat. You don't do vasodilation in those parts of your body that are submerged in the water. There's something called hydromiosis. Your body understands when the skin is already wet, and it understands that you can't shed heat through evaporation of sweat into a hot tub. So you'll sweat through your head, or if your arms are out, they'll sweat. But everything that's underwater in the hot tub is undergoing vasoconstriction to defend your body against the heat that it would otherwise be taking in. It feels good to be in the hot tub, but don't combine it with cold plunge. Go cold, wet, cold, dry, heat. So I don't want to tell people not to do something that's relaxing and feels good. What I'm trying to say is they don't get the same circulatory benefits if they're doing wet and wet.
So I have so about a month ago, I'm going to tell you what my experience was. And I was actually going to contact you. For the first time in a long time, I had a bit of a cold. It was fairly mild, and I was somewhat proud of my immune system for heading it off. But it lasted probably about 7-8 days, average length for cold. I backed off cold plunges, and I'll tell you why. Because in my mind, like it's a stressor. Like I backed off 8-mile runs and went to 3-mile runs. And I backed off cold plunges, did it like every third day because I was worried about stressing my system more when it was already under some stress, trying to fight the cold. Do you, and I'm fine now, do you in retrospect think that was the right thing or no?
Yeah, for you, it sounds like a really good thing. How did it work?
It worked fine, but I kept, with me, I have the patience level of a gnat. Like when I have a cold, it's supposed to be gone now. Like, why is it still here now? It's still here. So 8 days for me is a long damn time, but it's good. And then towards the tail end of it, I got back to cold plunging. So again, it's probably what you're saying is it's an individual thing, and I'm relatively in tune compared to some people. Yeah.
What I'm saying is this: it takes about 10 days of regular daily cold exposure for you to build brown fat. And this is from animal models and some human studies that show 10 days of regular cold exposure will cause mitobiogenesis. That is the synthesis of mitochondria in what could even be white fat cells, but they turn brown. There's something called beige fat, which is sort of in between. 10 days is not a long time. It takes years to lose it. Your body wants you to be healthy. So if you activate this brown fat with the cold exposure and you give it a couple of weeks, you are becoming cold acclimated. Your body will hold on to that for a couple of years. If you get into a point where you're like, I don't have it in me today, then physiologically, you're going to be fine. The danger for me is this. There isn't a day that goes by. I stare at that ice and I'm like, I could skip. I'll be fine. It's the psychological that gets me now. When I stop doing the crap that scares me, when I back away from the challenges, bad things happen in my life. I'm not so secure in myself, where I can be like, I got this. I got to get into that damn ice and I got to scare my system for that 15 seconds. And I got to take control of my breathing. And I got to start my day with a win. And then nothing bad happens. You can't hurt me. What, you didn't like my teaching evaluations? Of my paper just got like thrown out of some other journal? No big deal. Because I was up to my neck in ice water this morning for 2 minutes. What else does the world have? It's that psychological resilience that keeps me doing it every day.
Okay, another question too. When I get in the tub, I rarely ever submerge my head. Tell me, good, bad, I don't know. Should I be submerging my head? It's fine, right?
Yeah. I'm going to tell you a story, and then we'll see whether that's more convincing. This is not science, right? This is narrative. You got some great ancient grandfather, and it's the Ice Age, and he's eking out this existence between the glacier and the ocean. And how does he do it? He wades into the cold stream with a spear, and he waits for that fish to show up, and he frickin' stabs it and brings it home, walks back to the camp and cooks it over the fire. Did he dunk his head? I mean, you're fine. There might be some other ancient ancestor who says, well, that's not good enough. We're hungrier today. I got to dive underwater. I got to go get the dang lobster. But he's not there for more than a minute or two. I dunk my head every day. I try and avoid getting the top of my head too cold, but I go in and I blow a few bubbles just because it's a hard thing to do. 11 seconds is my all-time record for staying underwater. You don't have to do the head dunk. You get all the physiological benefits going up to your chin. But if what you need is that little extra challenge, then go ahead, go under, blow some bubbles for yourself.
So easing into it, is it a similar feeling as to when people ease themselves into a hot tub, where they go in up to their knees and then they wait a second and then they put their lower extremities into the water and then all of a sudden they plunge really quick? I was watching a video of somebody a couple days ago who didn't get in. She didn't get in much deeper than her sort of upper belly, right? And she just kind of stayed like this the whole time. And She was shivering and the whole thing. Does that part matter?
I think that there's some studies on partial versus whole, and they show differences. I think there's a lot of benefit to partial, but it's not quite the same. I'll tell you why. When you go whole body, you activate the dive reflex. When you go partial body, like when you first step in, you activate the gasp reflex. So you often see this when they're going to first get into the cold plunge, and they go like that. It's a very natural mammalian reflex, and it prepares your body for the danger of the cold water. But once you're in up to here, your body's like, all right, I guess we're diving. We got to conserve oxygen. We got to conserve the metabolic rate. We don't know how long we're going to be here for. So the gasp reflex is this sudden sympathetic nervous system activation. The dive reflex is the parasympathetic, the rest and digest system taking over, slowing everything down. So I've seen people do it all different kinds of ways. Like some suspend themselves over the tub and then they plunge in all at once. And I don't know, psychologically, maybe that's bad. Other people just sort of like, they dip their toe in a little bit at a time. You will never see me try and bully or coerce or like force somebody to get into the cold, because it's got to be their sense of accomplishment. It's, as far as I'm concerned, it's got to be like they chose it. They went in the way they want. They got out the way they want. They stayed as long as they want. And now they can be proud of themselves, because it wasn't me, with a megaphone saying, breathe, or something like that. And that might work for some other people or some other guys. You're just never going to see a part of my repertoire.
All right, two-part question then. So, number one, Like, what does somebody start at? 4 seconds? 40 seconds? Like, what
It's
would you
fine.
recommend? Somebody buys a
If you're
Morozko?
starting out,
Yeah.
you don't have to start at 34 degrees. Anything that makes you gasp, you know you've activated your nervous system. You know your brown fat. If you've got brown fat, your nervous system is trying to find it. So anything with the gasp reflex. So some people will start with cold showers and the tap water is 60 degrees. But to them, it feels like it's yeah, okay, Bobby, right? And it feels miserable. It's going to sound like bragging, but I'm not the only one. I was talking to Scott Carney about this. He wrote the book on Wim Hof, and he does a lot of cold exposure, and we were swapping notes. If it's not in the 30s, it's freaking boring. We're cold adapted. And so, 45 degrees it's like we were kids again. It's no big deal. We're just having fun. But once you get down to the 35, 36, I still feel that gasp reflex. I don't think I'm ever going to get used to it. Huberman talks about this. If you sit in there and it's quiescent water and you're very calm, then you're warming up the water around your skin and you're going to adjust because the water is helping you adjust. If you got a jet going or if you're like moving the water around, you're getting a constant flow of colder water up against your skin. It will extract more heat.
Yeah, I actually saw that episode. It's Huberman Labs for anybody who's wondering what we're talking about with Huberman. And he actually said there was a noticeable difference in effect from people who were sitting still and people who were moving.
He's right. But then if you watch the episode with him on the Rogan show, and Rogan's like, well, why don't you use the Morozko? He goes, oh, that's too cold for me. The more I learn about Andrew, the more I realize that guy is a profile in resilience. Like there is no inner bitch in that man that I can detect. If he says it's too cold, I'm not going to question him. Then Rick Rubin gets on Joe Rogan. He says, yeah, I did 30 minutes at 33 degrees. Now, Rick Rubin looks like a crazy ass, right? Like, I'm not going to question Rick Rubin either. If that's what he said he did, then he must have done it. Both of them are people whom I admire, and they're challenging themselves at different temperatures. I'm okay with that. For me, I got to have ice, or it just doesn't scare me. And when somebody says, we have competitors who say, yeah, but you don't have the same flow and you're not breaking up the thermal layer. That's when I say, when you get up to your neck in chunks of ice, the last thing on your mind is, I wonder how my thermal layer is doing. It's melting on my skin. I think I'm fine. So where do you find me? You can go to MorozkoForge.com. You can click on the science tab. You can see all the articles. I got this book coming out, Uncommon Cold. I'm on Substack. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Insta. I'm on all the sort of usual places except for Facebook. If you want an ice bath, I'd be happy to sell you one. The knowledge is pretty much free, but the equipment, it costs a lot of money.
I got one last question for you before we move on. I think I know the answer to this, and I think I got a real life example of the answer to this. I was in Chicago last week I made sure it was less than 24 hours. I landed at 4:45 and I left the next day at like 3:10. Okay, I was just afternoon to afternoon, did some filming at the CME, which Jimmy does a lot of as well, and I flew back that day. I sent a text to my family down here in Florida. I said 45 degrees in Chicago is warmer than 59 degrees in Florida. And I think I have a niece, her name's Bella, and she's in college, and she told me because wet is colder than dry, and it's always humid in Florida. Is that why cold plunge is better than cryotherapy? Is it just the water, or is it something else?
I'm glad you're bringing this up. The water will suck heat out of your skin way faster than the air will. Air is actually a good insulator. And so, they say, oh, it's negative 180 in your cryo chamber or something like that. And it is for like a second, but your body is warming up that air. So this is physics, whereas the water sucks that heat right out of you. But the big difference between the ice bath and the cryo chamber is that the cryo can give you frostbite and the ice bath can't. Frostbite is when the water in your skin cells turns to ice. And that's more than a burn. It's destroying the skin when the ice shards form inside your cell. And that can't happen at 33 degrees Fahrenheit. You can go into a hypothermic state. It'll take a long time, maybe 45 minutes, especially if you're cold adapted. But you're never going to get frostbite in the ice bath. So that's one. The other one that almost nobody knows about, and the frostbite's the big one, is grounding. The best way to discharge the static electricity that accumulates in your body is to go into the ocean. Second best way, fresh water. Third best way, get in a Morozko because it's grounded. The tub is grounded. The water is grounded. It's 20 times more effective than walking barefoot in the grass for rebalancing your electrical system. And why would you want that? Because the red blood cells in your body, when they don't have the right charge on them, they will aggregate and increase your risk of stroke or heart attack or deep vein thrombosis. When you get grounded, they disaggregate, it reduces the blood viscosity and improves your circulation. The cryo chamber, just like the shower, just like an acrylic or a fiberglass tub, it won't ground you like that. And I live on the 32nd floor downtown Phoenix. I need my grounding. There's no substitute for it. There's no pill you can take that will, electrically bound. There's no workout you can do to be grounded. Just get in the Morozko.
Really appreciate the support. Check us out on any of your podcast platforms. We're on every one of them. We upload the entire show to X. So keep watching, tell your friends. We really appreciate you guys.